Morbid Facts That You Didn't Know About the Holocaust, Part 3. During World War II, Pope Pius XII told the United States that he couldn't confirm reports that Germany was executing Jews. But in 2020, newly unsealed documents revealed that he was lying and knew all along that the Holocaust was happening. Homosexual males were identified in concentration camps by downward-facing pink triangles. Because of this identification, many of them were still considered criminals after their camps were freed. As a result, many of them were sent back to prison to serve out their terms. In the 1980s, a Holocaust denial group offered $50,000 to anyone who could prove that gas chambers were used at Auschwitz. They were forced by judge to pay that and an additional $40,000 to Auschwitz survivor Mel Mermelstein, who provided the proof. Creepy Ask Reddits, Part 9. What's the fastest you've seen a crowd go from excited to horrified? The entire assembly of students at the elementary school where astronaut/teacher Krista McAuliffe taught at. They watched the Space Shuttle Challenger explode seconds after takeoff, killing everyone on board including their teacher. WWE's Over the Edge in 1999. Owen Hart fell 70 feet to his death during the event, and the company inexplicably continued the show after he'd been taken to the hospital. The Station nightclub fire in Rhode Island 2003. The band Great White had just gotten on stage and the crowd was jamming out. Within 2 minutes, the whole place was up in flames due to faulty pyrotechnics, and everyone was screaming in agony. 100 people died, including the guitarist of the band, Ty Longley. Creepy Ask Reddits, Part 8. What's the scariest story you've heard or told? I met a guy who was once hitchhiking around Australia with some friends. One of the guys said they were near his distant uncle's house whom he'd never met before. He got a phone number from a family member and the uncle offered them a place to stay. They said he seemed like a pretty normal guy, friendly and cheery. When it was time to go to bed, the uncle took them to a closet that was totally full of backpacks and sleeping bags. They didn't think much of it at the time and all grabbed a kit. They stayed a couple days and nothing out of the ordinary happened. Afterwards, the uncle drove them to the bus station and they continued on their way. About a year later, that man was arrested and charged with several counts of murder. He was the man who was picking up young hitchhikers and slaughtering them. The guy who told me this story was 100% certain that he slept in the sleeping bag of one of his victims. Creepy Ask Reddits, Part 10. Forensic investigators of Reddit, what are some of the most disturbing and horrific cases you've worked on? I do fire investigation, and one that stuck with me was a girl started speaking to God at the dinner table. And then that night, she lit her room on fire with herself in it. She was likely mentally disturbed. I think about that one a lot. Gotta be the guy who stabbed his newborn and 4-year-old before slitting his throat and jabbing the knife into his chest. The worst part was his phone on the bed with numerous texts from his fiancée begging him not to harm the children. Had a paranoid schizophrenic who forced his elderly mother to eat rocks, and I mean a shitload of rocks, to the point where she died. He told police that he was feeding her rocks to weigh her down so that God couldn't take her yet. Morbid Facts That You Didn't Know About 9/11, Part 3. For 40 years, there was a federal aviation rule that allowed commercial airline pilots to be armed with guns. But this policy was rescinded by the FAA just 2 months before 9/11. The company that owned the World Trade Center had scheduled a meeting on the 88th floor of the North Tower on the morning of 9/11. But they had to reschedule the night before because one person could not attend. The meeting was going to address what to do in the event of a terrorist attack. Disney had to edit and recreate the entire ending scene for Lilo and Stitch because of 9/11. They replaced a Boeing 747 with a red spaceship and changed the city buildings to a mountain landscape. Since 9/11, more than 40,000 people have been diagnosed with cancers and illnesses due to the debris of the fallen towers. More first responders have died from 9/11 related illnesses than on the actual day of 9/11. Ridiculous Deaths, Part 2. In 2015, an 18-year-old in Texas decided to commit suicide by snakebite. Sitting in his car, he allowed his pet king cobra to bite him multiple times on each arm. He was found dead from cardiac arrest and the snake was never found. The man who once had the longest beard in the world died after he stepped on it and broke his neck. Diana Ross, who sang Ain't No Mountain High Enough, lost her ex-husband in a mountain climbing accident. In 1975, a man died from laughter while watching his favorite TV show, The Goodies. His widow later sent the program a letter thanking them for making her husband's final moments so pleasant. In Houston, Texas, a 19-year-old man named Rashad died while attempting to play Russian roulette. Apparently, he didn't know how the game works since he tried using a semi-automatic pistol instead of a revolver. Morbid Facts, Part 143. In 2012, a Jesus statue in India had water mysteriously dripping from its toes. Worshippers flocked from all over to collect and sometimes drink this miracle water. But soon enough, the source of the water was found to be a clogged toilet near the statue. After the Tiananmen Square massacre, the Chinese government sent bills to the families of the protesters for the cost of the bullets used to kill their loved ones. Over the last 10 years, about 10 Americans have been accidentally shot by dogs. 5 of them happened in Florida. Jeremy Rodale was a longevity expert who popularized the term organic food. While filming an interview for the Dick Cavett Show, he declared, "I've decided to live to be 100 and I've never felt better in my life." But minutes later, Rodale died of a heart attack while still being filmed. Morbid Facts, Part 144. In 1978, 15-year-old Mary Vincent was hitchhiking in California when she was picked up by 56-year-old Larry Singleton. The man eventually knocked her out with a sledgehammer and sexually assaulted her that night. The next day, he cut off both her arms with a hatchet and threw her into a ditch to die. But Mary managed to pack her stumps with blood to stop the bleeding and spent all night crawling out. She eventually made it to the highway and started walking, naked and covered in blood. The first car that saw her sped away in horror. The second car was a couple on their honeymoon who picked her up and she survived. Singleton was sentenced to 14 years in prison but was released 6 years early due to good behavior. He would go on to murder a different woman named Roxanne Hayes a few years later. Morbid Facts, Part 140. In 2009, actor Dean Winters suffered from a bacterial infection and died in the ambulance but was revived. After recovering, he developed gangrene and had multiple amputations and skin grafts. He is now better known for playing Mayhem in Allstate insurance commercials. Janis Joplin changed her will just 2 days before dying at the age of 27. She gave her estate to her parents and gave additional cash to her siblings. She even set aside $2,500 for her friends to throw a party in her honor and to, quote, "get blasted after I'm gone." Cat burning was a form of entertainment in France prior to the 1800s. People would gather cats in a net and burn them over a bonfire while they laughed and cheered. This was done mainly because cats were associated with witchcraft and were burned as symbols of the devil. Creepy Ask Reddits, Part 2. What is the creepiest thing you've seen in the woods or in remote areas? Back when I was a kid, some friends and I came across people in robes chanting around a campfire in the woods. We were staying at a friend's house for a birthday party and went for a late night walk. This was back in the late 80s during the Satanic Panic. Looking back now, I'm sure it was just some teenagers goofing off, but at the time it scared the living bejesus out of us. I'd been at football training with a few of my cousins when I was about 10 years old. We decided to take a walk before our parents picked us up, so we went along the canal towpath. My cousin looked down in the canal and saw a really nice jacket floating along, and being a weird scavenger person, decided to reach in and fish it out. Well, the jacket turned over, and so did the man wearing it. He also had no face left. Not gonna lie, that was rough. Creepy Ask Reddits, Part 7. What is the creepiest or most unexplained thing that's happened to you that you still think about to this day? I had a recurring nightmare of a pitch-black parasite sucking the life out of me. Sometimes it would wait in dark corners for me to go to bed, and my cats always slept on my bed when it happened. It was a very stressful time for me, and I soon got an itch in the area of my chest where I dreamed the parasite was sucking the life out of me. I eventually got sick and felt a pea-sized lump in the same spot, so I went to my doc and they ordered a biopsy. As it turned out, I had male breast cancer at the age of 28. After I got well again, the dream never came back, and my cats slept in their usual places again instead of on my bed. The dream was creepy enough, but what made it for me was my cats protecting me. Weird History Facts, Part 7. The ancient Romans didn't have toothpaste or toothbrushes, but they had perfect teeth because their diets were so low in sugar. The Guinness Book of World Records recognizes the 1927 presidential election of Liberia as the most fraudulent in history. Although there were only 15,000 registered voters in Liberia at the time, Charles D.B. King received 234,000 and won the election. Incest was encouraged in ancient Egypt, as with many aristocracies, to keep the bloodline pure. Moreover, if they were twins and one was a boy and one was a girl, they were married at birth because it was assumed that they must have banged in the womb. Creepy Ask Reddits, Part 6. Redditors with significant others who talk in their sleep. What is the creepiest thing they've said? I talk in my sleep regularly, but one instance comes to mind. My significant other said she was going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. On her way back, I said, "It's following you," and went back to sleep. My wife doesn't talk in her sleep, but I did once wake up to her standing over me and staring at me Paranormal Activity style. It was terrifying, and she has no recollection of it. She said, "Too many Asians here." I'm Asian. I crawled into bed when she was asleep. She reached over and grabbed my arm. She snuggled my arm a bit and I thought it was sweet. Until, with a thick Russian accent, she says, "I break you," and acted like she was snapping my arm. Soft, creepy laughter, then immediately propping up at a 90-degree angle saying, "It's all part of the show," then going back to sleep. Creepy Ask Reddits, Part 5. What's the creepiest thing that happened to you personally that made you question reality? I was living in Boston. I woke up at 3 a.m. or so to my cat jumping onto my bed and curling in between my calf muscles and going to sleep. My cat would do this every night since I was 5 years old. That was his spot. It was something I was very familiar with. Thing is, my cat was living with my parents on the West Coast, so I couldn't understand what the hell I just felt. But I knew it was my cat. I just figured I was dreaming. Got a call from my parents the following morning that my cat had died around midnight the previous night. That was 3 hours behind since I was on the East Coast. Guess that was my cat traveling to Boston to come see me one last time. These are some morbid facts that you didn't know about the Lincoln assassination. Lincoln's bodyguard was an alcoholic who had previously gotten in trouble for drinking on the job. He wasn't at his post to protect Lincoln that night because he was next door drinking at the Star Saloon, the same saloon where John Wilkes Booth was drinking to build up the courage to assassinate the president. The chair that Lincoln was shot in still has his bloodstains on it. John Wilkes Booth also planned on assassinating Ulysses S. Grant along with Lincoln, but he didn't attend the play because his wife was on bad terms with Lincoln's wife at the time. Instead, the other man in Lincoln's balcony was military officer Henry Rathbone. After the assassination, he was overwhelmed with guilt for the rest of his life for not preventing it. He slowly went mad and eventually stabbed his wife to death before he was committed to a mental asylum for the rest of his life. Creepy Ask Reddits, Part 4. People that do autopsies. What's the weirdest thing that you have found that didn't have anything to do with the person's death? Pennies. Hundreds of pennies, nearly $6 worth inside the skin all over the arms and legs. Deceased was a hermit, lived alone, ordered out for every meal. Apparently he'd been surgically implanting pennies in his skin for years. No effing clue why. Once spoke with a pathologist at a conference. During her training, they were doing an autopsy on a body that was found by the river. They did a CAT scan and something looked funny about his gut. When they opened him up, his stomach moved. It was a snake that had burrowed inside his body. It even struck and bit one of the techs before they realized what was going on. Morbid Facts, Part 141. Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. Researchers would later discover that this was because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies. Unlike male bodies, female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose. The only reason this was done was to prevent the embalmers from getting weird with the bodies. Children who are victims of hot car deaths are often found with large portions of their hair ripped out. The only reason dogs love squeaky toys is because they sound like little animals dying. Every unborn baby grows a mustache in the womb, which then spreads to cover the entire body. The baby then eats this fine hair called lanugo, then excretes it after birth with their first bowel movement. These are some morbid facts that you didn't know about the Columbine massacre. This Columbine class of '99 photo was taken just a few months before the shooting. In the top left corner, shooters Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold can be seen making shooting gestures at the camera while wearing sunglasses. This is a game of hangman that a group of students played while they were locked in their classroom during the shooting. While being at one mass shooting is horrifying and unlucky enough, Regina Rode was at 2 of them. 8 years after surviving Columbine, she was a student at Virginia Tech when 32 people were killed. On the day of the shooting, 2 10-kilogram bombs were planted in the school cafeteria right before lunch. Luckily, the bombs failed to detonate, otherwise all 488 students in the cafeteria at the time could have died. These melted chairs were the result of Dylan Klebold trying to set off one of those bombs with a Molotov cocktail. Creepy Ask Reddits, Part 3. What is the scariest story you know that is 100% real? I was working the evening shift at a gas station. A man comes in all disoriented, so I go to help him out. He has a gash on his head and doesn't know where he was. I couldn't see any crashes around, so I assumed he had fallen or something. Normally, we're supposed to stay behind the glass shielded register area whenever someone is in the store. I, being a nice human being, went to help while calling the police/EMS. They got there and checked him out and thought that his head may have been fractured. They took him to the ER and I went back to work. Cops stopped back on by for some coffee a few hours later. They told me the guy got hit by a baseball bat trying to break into a little girl's bedroom and was wanted for rape and murder in 2 other states. I never left the register area at night again. Morbidly Wholesome, Part 13. Remember this kid? He was saved by a dog when his parents left him in a garbage bin to die with his umbilical cord still attached. This is what he looks like now. Eitzaz Hassan was only 15 years old when he tackled a suicide bomber who tried entering his school. Sadly, he was killed but succeeded in saving hundreds of his fellow schoolmates. A Brazilian police officer was saved when his Nokia in his back pocket stopped a bullet that was fired at him. In 2015, a Texas father saved his son's life when doctors wrongly declared him brain dead and wanted to take him off life support. He barricaded himself in the hospital with a gun and had a 3-hour standoff with a SWAT team until his son squeezed his hand. The son went on to have a full recovery. Morbid Facts, Part 142. In 2009, a Florida woman named Marie Moore shot and killed her own son at a shooting range before taking her own life. She had left a note that said, "I'm so sorry. I had to send my son to heaven and myself to hell." She said that she could have only killed herself, but felt that she needed to, quote, save her son and the rest of the world. She wrote, "Hopefully when I die, there will be 1,000 years of peace." 2 murderers can be seen in the background of Mark Jackson's Hoops basketball card from 1990. The Menendez brothers had murdered their parents and bought courtside tickets with their parents' money before they were convicted. In 1949, 12-year-old Charles Cohen hid inside of a closet while a mass murderer shot and killed his whole family. Nearly 70 years later, his granddaughter would survive the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting by hiding in a closet.